back to Q&A with S&A. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Shane.
And today we are welcoming in the studio Andrew McPhee, who I was just about to say not a very old friend, but an old friend.
Yes, thank you.
Not old, but old.
How does that? Okay,
Exactly.
I'm with you. Yep.
Not old as in age, old as in we have been friends for a long time.
Yes.
So, Andrew, we've known you for a while. Our listeners may have come and heard you speak, or they may have followed your podcast, so they may have heard about you. But you introduce yourself. What is it that you're doing now? And then we'll talk about how you got there.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me along. I follow your podcast as well. It's always full of insights. No, it's fantastic. I really enjoy it. So what am I doing now? My business is Synergist, and we are focused on bridging the crypto service gap. What that means is crypto investing has become very popular. So more than a third of Australians are either invested in crypto today or are planning on investing in the next 12 months. And yet the traditional advisory market, wealth advice market, are really struggling to understand how to adapt to that and embrace that. And so a lot of these investors are sort of left unsure on how to proceed, what to do. And so that's the piece that I'm trying to help, both from an investor point of view and also from an advisor point of view.
Yeah. What brought you into this space? Obviously, it's a big thing, like everyone's talking about crypto, but why this and why the level that you're at? Because you're not advising people on what to buy in crypto. You're advising them about crypto. So what was the decision in that?
Okay, there's a few parts of that answer. So
it's simple, isn't it? Just a one-liner?
Yeah, 62.
There we go. Done.
Next.
Done.
No. So what brought me into it is my background is very based on financial services, innovation, and technology, and so I left corporate about 8 years ago after having some senior executive roles in ANZ Bank and Australia Post and others, and started doing consulting, and naturally found myself gravitating towards the sectors that really exhibited those characteristics, that innovation, that technology. And so crypto really, or blockchain, Web3 is an industry that resonated, and I just started finding I had more and more clients in that space. And then because of my background in traditional finance, I then looked at it and thought, why is this not being discussed? Why hasn't this been embraced by the whole financial services industry? What are the blockers here? And then I started looking into that, and I tend to sort of find problems and then try and work out how to solve them. So that's what led me into zeroing in on this particular problem to solve.
Yeah, and the focus of Synergist is to educate people, right? Which is why we love what you're doing, because that is a really important part about crypto, because there's so much, I heard it from my mate down the pub. Like, we hear that because that's where we're meeting with people all the time who are talking about their financial situations, and they will say not just about crypto, but a lot about crypto. My mate said, or I've heard about this, I saw it on a website somewhere, or I saw a YouTube video about it. And so why the education side of things? Like, what made you think to yourself, this is a big deal?
Yeah, so the main trigger for that was probably the conversations that I was finding that I was having with my family and friends. And so, I'd talk to other parents at my kids' schools and or people at work, or people that I meet, and the same conversation just kept repeating and repeating and repeating. And it made me realize that there's a massive unmet need here that needs to be addressed. And that conversation goes something along the lines of, when they find out that you're in crypto, some of them just sort of throw up their hands in disgust and walk away. You're like, all right, that's fine. But most of them will say, wow, okay, I'm really interested in it, but I don't know anything about it, and I don't have time to learn. And then when I do go in and try and look at it, it's just full of all these crypto bros spruiking all these things. It seems like the Wild West. And so I don't do anything as a result. But I am really interested.
Yeah.
How can I learn more? And then that was even my personal situation as well. Say 5 years ago, I was in the same boat. Despite even all of my background in innovation and financial services, I'd stayed away from it. And that's a pretty smart principle to take when you're investing. Is if you don't understand something, stay away from it. But how do you learn something that's so innovative, so different, so new? And who do you work out? How do you work out that you can trust somebody? And so that's what led me into the education piece. So firstly, because I didn't need an AFSL, an Australian Financial Services license, because one doesn't exist for digital assets.
That's right, yeah.
So you can't give advice on it. And so education is a way to support people without giving specific product advice. And the second thing was independence. You're right to be skeptical about people when they're trying to tell you and teach you about something. You should always be sitting there saying, well, what are you selling? There's always a vested interest in there pretty much. And in crypto, it's rife. The internet is rife with people flogging tokens or protocols or exchanges or something. And so I've set up a system where I'm not selling my own products and services. And so that independence allows me to have build trust more easily, have more integrity in what I'm educating and supporting people on.
Yeah.
And with that, and you talked before about being the Wild West, because it is an unregulated market. There's talk about it becoming more regulated with events in the US and other places. But trying to separate the garbage from the fact and what the underlying principle of cryptocurrency is as well, the blockchain, et cetera, et cetera. It's really important, I think, for people to be educated in that respect because it is what's the right term? It's the blockchain and everything goes with it is something that the future, it is promising in terms of future prospects of what it can do for the world, the economy, community, everything. And it's not just about the highs and lows of what crypto does one day to the next, is it?
It's a great point, really, really important actually. And I'd take it even a little bit further and say that it's not actually what change it's going to drive tomorrow, it's what's change it's driving today. So most of your viewers are probably going to be surprised to hear that stable coins, I'll explain what a stable coin is in a moment, but stable coins, the dollar volume transacted in stable coins was higher last month than the combined transaction volume of Visa and MasterCard.
Wow.
So these are the two major global transaction platforms and stable coins, which is crypto, a type of cryptocurrency, have now overtaken that. And so what a stable coin is it's basically a cryptocurrency that's pegged to a fiat currency.
Okay.
And a fiat currency is like the Australian dollar or the US dollar or Canadian dollar or whatever. And so stable coins, that's going to be probably the biggest, the big wave of change that's going to lead a lot of the adoption of blockchain into our traditional financial services market because it's probably the smallest step change in process. It's still working the same. It's just happening decentralized and instantly at a very low cost.
Just further on what Shane was saying as well, because I think we do think of this whole bro attitude with regard to crypto. I don't invest in it at all. I'm not a huge person to invest in things
Got
that
some good tokens for you.
I know. I'm sure you have. I know that the kids and Shane have got their little crypto elements to their raise accounts and whatever because it's pretty low risk at that point. But when we talk about blockchain, it's not just about cryptocurrency. It's about a whole range of things that people may not have already thought about. And this is the part that I find really interesting because there's so much innovation involved in this. It'll be property titles. It'll be buying and selling artwork and things like that where the title of those things will change via electronic means rather than the way we currently do things, which is you kind of go to the titles office and they hold you a piece of paper.
Well, that's been
It doesn't
upgraded
happen now, but those things where you won't necessarily in the future need to go through a conveyancer because I'll have a property title and I'll be able to give it to you and you'll then take it from me and those sorts of things. So we're not it's got an element of application way beyond what we're thinking of now, right?
It certainly does. And I'll give you two examples that might bring that to life a bit. A bit of background for your listeners who might not really understand the blockchain, but basically it's like a decentralized ledger. So rather than most companies now, a bank, for example, would have its own database that they control, that they own, and everything goes in and out of that database based on their rules and by their terms. And then everyone in that chain of a transaction would have their own database that they're all controlling and managing. And in blockchain, it's essentially a decentralized database that's not that everybody has complete transparency and access to in real time. So very, very simplistic discussion. Yeah. But a couple of contexts. One is most of your listeners most of your clients would be investing in the share market. And so the ASX, the Australian share market, they're struggling to get to T+2 settlement. So, settlement time in 2 days after the transaction. So, and they've tried to do it better, but, they've really struggled. And now this is a whole, the infrastructure behind the ASX and all the settlements with chess and it's a really lengthy process. There's a lot of people taking, playing a role in that. Each of these players are taking a cut, taking a fee, a margin along the way. So if that's what you have to do to transact in shares in Australia. If you're buying tokens, if you're buying crypto, then that is happening in real time. Yep. It's automated, autonomous transactions that are settling in real time for very, very, very little cents. Yep. Another way to bring that to life, another example is I was talking to a friend of mine who's a lawyer and specializes in crypto a couple of weeks ago, and he was having to represent a client who needed to transfer $10 million from Australia, from Sydney to South Africa. It took 2 weeks. It took a team of 5 lawyers. Yep. And it cost a couple of $100,000 to facilitate that transaction. Yeah. And that was just from his side. The other side was probably similar, right? Yep. In crypto, that would have cost cents and it would have been done in seconds. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's the paradigm shift in this technology, and you can imagine how that rolls out into our established financial system. The degree of change that is going to drive. And it probably also opens up your minds to why perhaps there's been a lot of resistance to this technology and who might be putting that resistance up.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But I think that's also because you hear about the war stories as well where it's gone wrong with cryptocurrencies and otherwise. And I think that's part of it. It's about the education process, which is what you do. And for the market to mature a bit, I think in that respect, to then understand that this is the path this is the way it is going to be going forward. It's just about trying to eliminate those rogues and those cowboys in the industry who might be tarnishing it and where that theft or otherwise has been coming into it, and trying to mitigate that part so that this can actually move forward as it should.
Yeah, and look, there's plenty of fraud and theft going on in traditional finance as well.
Absolutely,
and there's plenty of nefarious actors out there in traditional finance. Yep. So that's never going to go away. That's human nature.
Correct.
But you're absolutely right. Crypto, it's a good way to frame it is to think about the internet and the adoption of the internet and the adoption rate of where the internet was and where it is now and how quickly it got adopted. We're at about 2002 for the internet with crypto, if you're overlaying it. And the adoption is actually going slightly higher for crypto than the internet as well. And so with any new technology, as it's emerging, it's always open for fraud or misuse. In fact, the main value use case for crypto was Silk Road, and that was they were selling a lot of things. It was all about the libertarian movement, but they just happened to be selling heroin and and assassins and whatever else on there as well. But But and the internet was the same. You think about the development of the internet, and you think about the dodgy stuff that was happening on the internet, and that drove technology advances in video production and streaming and all of this.
Podcasts.
Yeah, podcasts. so it is similar, and I think that the key to it is regulation. And unfortunately, as a jurisdiction, Australia is lagging behind a number of others, and that's costing us in a couple of key ways. One, innovation. A lot of innovation that's coming out of Australia is simply just going to Dubai or Singapore or where there's more clarity, but it's also costing us from consumer protections, because if there isn't regulatory clarity, Australian businesses are limited in what they can actually do and how much they can invest in building out their business. So that forces Australian retail investors to start looking elsewhere. And so, you know, if you look at FTX, a big exchange that, you know, went down, they were based out of the Bahamas. So, you know, if something goes wrong and you've got to end up going to a court in the Bahamas to try and get your money back, good luck, you know. So I think that we really need to get our act together from a regulatory point of view, clarity point of view in Australia. We need to balance it carefully between innovation and protection, so that Australian investors can use Australian companies to actually to invest through, because then they're going to get the best protections.
Isn't that a bit contradictory though to the whole concept of blockchain and cryptocurrency, that they don't? It's decentralized.
Look, it's a great point, and I think that so I've just finished reading a book called Digital Gold. It's about the genesis of blockchain technologies all the way back to Sakamoto and you know, all the original cypherpunks and everything that came up with the underlying blockchains and technologies and brought it to life. And it was grounded in libertarian principles. It was about, it's your money, you control it, you own it, don't trust the banks, don't trust central governments and all that. There's still a big part of that in crypto, but we are moving out of those innovators and early adopters into the early majority, where people, you know, look, I have a bit of a libertarian streak to me, sure. But at the end of the day, you know, am I worried about the Australian government, you know, invading my privacy? You know, not really. You know, am I worried about the banks stealing my money? No, I'm not. You know, so I think that most people are taking a bit more of a pragmatic view when we get into the mass market. And the original cypherpunks will be, you know, rolling in their graves on the concepts of this conversation, I'm sure. But that's the price of you know, getting to the critical mass market.
Going on from that then, Andrew, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about cryptocurrency that you have come across in your education, in the education side of things?
Yeah, great question. I think that it's the one size fits all kind of, you know, misconception. It's because people don't understand something, you tend to anchor it to, you know, some big, you know, event that's happened, like a fraud or a scam or something, and then, you know, you tar all tokens with the same brush. And so, you know, but the reality is, you know, if you look at cryptocurrencies, you've got Bitcoin, which is in a class of its own, and that's like a blue chip token. And then you've got a whole range of other narratives. You spoke about real world assets, and then there's AI, and AI is and crypto and technologies that are naturally very complementary. So there's a lot of value getting created there. You've got you know, GameFi, you've got all these other, and then at the bottom of the list, you've got meme coins, you know, a picture of a dog worth $50 billion. And so people see that and think, oh, that's ridiculous. I'm not putting my money in that. We're thinking about, like, you know, a meme coin or something. And hey, great. I don't put my money in meme coins either. But it doesn't mean that Bitcoin might not have a really important, valuable role for an appropriate allocation into your portfolio. And so I think that's a big one is you know, that people generalize a risk profile when the reality is there's very, very different risk profiles across the asset class.
Yeah, which is that's true of all financial investment, isn't it? That there's different risk for different things.
Yeah.
So crypto is just another one of those. So talk us through the process behind, someone comes in like me.
Mm-hmm.
I've got no idea about any of this. What are the things that you say to them that you have to know in order to be able to safely and securely invest in something like crypto?
Well, the first thing I ask them is, have you got a financial advisor?
Mm-hmm.
Because, any investment into this should be done as part of a holistic strategy.
Yep.
That crypto is just one asset class, and it should only be, if you're talking about putting everything all into crypto, I'd be strongly advising against that, especially as a starting point. But so that's the first thing. Do you have a financial advisor that you can talk to that has that and so that you've made an informed decision about what is an appropriate allocation of your net worth? Interestingly, when I asked that, the vast majority, almost all responses are no, I don't.
Yeah.
My financial advisor won't talk to me about it. My accountants tried to talk me out of it. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
And so there's a real need for industry change on that to support their clients.
Yeah.
Otherwise, practices will lose clients.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then when we talk about crypto more specifically, it's very similar investment principles than what you would be talking through your clients with any other asset class. What's your time horizon?
Yep.
What's your personal conviction? I can't give advice, so I can explain what the different narratives are, but they have to make up their own minds around which narratives they like the sound of and what an allocation across the narratives might be. What's your capital strategy? Are you going to dollar cost average in? Do you have a lump sum amount? Do you, what are your goals for your investments? And how are you going to hold yourself accountable to those goals? The biggest challenge for people isn't actually when they buy in; it's when they take money out.
Yeah.
Because that's when you realize, as you realize your outcome, your net profit, your profit or your loss. And when it's going up, no one wants to take the money off the table. And yet for a lot of people, that's what they should be doing is dollar cost averaging out, not just in. So helping them sort of think through those things and come up with a plan, a strategy, helps them actually have more peace of mind about investing into an asset class that they're still just learning about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think you talked about before about AFSLs not being available for crypto? Time horizons and that, you got any feel for that?
Yeah, I've got a reasonable feel based on there's a lot of engagement at the moment with the government and DECA, which is the Digital Economy Council of Australia. And I speak to a lot of lawyers in this space and key players in this space. So, look, I think that there's ongoing. The government has become more engaged in the last 12 months. And I think that early 2026, we should see a framework. It won't be probably clear enough for a lot of players to feel confident getting into, when I say players, I mean like fund managers or banks to really act on, but it will be clear enough for existing players, I think, to feel more comfortable about what they're doing and perhaps invest more in their Australian operations. The challenge is that, the way legislation or these policies should be coming to be is through the politicians, debating the principles and agreeing their stance, and then it goes into the Treasury Department, who then sort of write down a whole bunch of protocols and everything, and then it ends up with ASIC to enforce. Yep. And no, it's happened the opposite way.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I don't think our current
I'm not sure
political leaders are in the headspace or the capability to actually
capability more than anything else.
Well, look, in their defence, because I think from a leader's point of view, I think you're probably right, but there's a growing number of politicians who understand crypto and are advocating for crypto from both the major parties,
Yeah.
from within both the major parties. There's actually a group, something called like the Parliamentarians for Crypto or something like that. There's a group within Parliament.
They've got their Facebook group. And
They do.
Yeah.
Who are basically saying, how can we help drive this change from within? Because they understand. I mean, just look at the numbers. The politicians are interested in votes.
Yeah.
You've got, by some people saying up to 40% of Australians, either into crypto, invest in it now or want to be in it. I mean, that's a lot of votes and that's growing every year. So the politicians, if they're haven't got it on their radar right now, they should.
Yeah. I think when you talked about the risk mitigation as well, that, there needs to be some change and we need to have some policy around it because from a political standpoint, that's a bit of a risk mitigator, isn't it? Like if your constituents are coming to you saying, I've been fleeced by XYZ on crypto, then, nobody wants to be sitting across the table from someone who's lost a lot of money based on, making poor decisions because we don't have any policy framework around it. So that's probably a big deal too. Bit of self-interest for them to avoid their own risk.
Yeah, and it's probably the same dynamic that's put it on the red list up until now as well, because they don't understand it. And if anyone asks them about crypto, they'd run a million miles from it, because it is unregulated and is a problem. And it is complex. It's not like equities where it's like, well, is it a share? Is it not a share? Is that a bond or is it not a bond? Is that Forex or is it not Forex? It's there's a lot more complexity and variance in tokens and what you can do with them. So the industry has trouble really articulating the different types and new innovations that are occurring all the time around decentralized finance and so it's understandable that the regulators are struggling to kind of understand the space and keep up, but it doesn't mean they don't have to.
Yeah, correct. And there's a potential opportunity if they get it right as well.
There is. We've got a very small window there. I mean, if you go to Dubai and you want to, set up a crypto business, they'll pay for you to fly over there. They'll put you up. They'll pay for your hotel. They'll pay for your food. They've got 5 different businesses over there because it's privatized. The licensing is privatized. Okay. And they're all there to help you get a license. And that's what they're motivated by, helping you get a license. And they're doing everything they can to support you through that process because they want innovation in digital assets, in blockchain, to be occurring in their jurisdiction. And that's just at the opposite end of the spectrum from where Australia has been. But if you look at the US, the biggest jurisdiction in the world, they're flipped 180 degrees. They were the biggest, had the most antagonistic approach out of any jurisdiction just about towards crypto under Gary Gensler. And now with the change in administration, they've gone 180. They've set up a strategic Bitcoin reserve. They've announced that they're advocating for stable coins and they're going to be driving stable coin adoption and innovation out of the US. And their working group is coming back with a regulatory framework in August on how it's, and as to use Trump's words, to be the crypto capital of the world. And that's what that's what they're driving. They want it to happen. They understand it's going to happen. They want it to happen in their jurisdiction in the US.
Yeah.
I think the other part, just finishing on regulatory requirements and so on, taxation is the other part, and bringing that to in terms of Aintree Group. A lot of misunderstanding about how the tax works on it, and also getting some probably future guidance on that and whether that evolves in terms of the current interpretation of tax where it needs to be to make it a real currency as opposed to a capital asset. I think that's critical to the whole evolution of cryptocurrency in this country.
Yeah, and I think you're probably much more. Well, I know you're much more qualified than I am to comment on that particular topic. Well, one thing I would say is that in the US, they did repeal their SAB 121, which is Special Accounting Bulletin 121. And that was one of the tools that the administration over there had been using to block this technology from coming into the finance system, where they were forcing, from an accounting point of view, if a bank wanted to custody or take into consideration one of their clients' crypto assets, say you've got 100,000 Bitcoin in dollars in Bitcoin and you wanted to get a loan, if you took that $100,000 in Bitcoin, you had to treat it as a liability, not an asset.
Yep.
Which is mind-boggling.
Correct.
Yeah.
But they've repealed that, and that was just there to block progress of this industry.
Yeah.
But I think in Australia, it's I tell people, talk to a qualified accountant and get your tax advice. But I also say if there's a lot of people who have been in crypto for a while, and back when they thought it was an anonymous address that you could have on a on a cold wallet somewhere, and no one will ever know.
Yes,
And I just say, look, you've got two choices. You can either come clean and get ahead of this and just go through the hard work of going through all your transactions and mapping it all out. But if you're proactive, there's software that can help you. There are accountants who can help you with this. Then the ATO are likely to take a pragmatic approach to it.
Yep.
They're going to be reasonable.
Yeah.
That's option one. Or option two is, I hope you enjoy the weather in Dubai.
yes.
Because sooner or later you will get.
Yeah.
They can map
exactly.
it. They can track it. They will.
Yeah.
There's anonymity is, is very, very hard in a digital age.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. I think that was the original, when everyone was first talking about it, was that, I'm going to be able to do all this trading and nobody's going to know. And we still do have people come through the door and say, but I don't need to talk to that about that stuff. You just don't know that it's there. And we're like, okay, that's not quite the way it works.
No.
But
Well, they don't know until you decide to pull it out and spend the money.
Yeah, correct.
And then they'll go, where did that money come from? And then they can trace it. And then they can look back and then they can see all the other transactions that wallet address has done. And that's when you're in trouble.
I think it's just a general thing as well these days that all of this technology and innovation means that tracking transactions in any space is much easier these days than what it was, 15 or 20 years ago. And that's beyond
that's part of blockchain,
crypto.
though, isn't it?
Exactly.
That's part of the benefits of it.
It is 100%.
Yeah.
It's transparent.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the fraud, question a lot. It's another misconception about crypto is that people think it's just full of, it's people who are, avoiding anti-money laundering or terrorist funding or whatever. And it's like, well, hang on, there's a lot more fraud committed with currency than there is with cryptocurrency. It's actually terrible for that because it is completely
traceable.
transparent and traceable. And
you certainly can't walk around with a big bag of Bitcoin in your suitcase and hand it under the table at a casino, can you?
No.
So it's a little different to that, and I think that's it. People still think that they that is an issue with crypto, is that it is, rife for fraud. And when you do think about it, that, how much money, actual physical money gets laundered.
There are some elements that people who want to commit fraud, that are attracted to.
Yeah.
Like it's easily transportable, right? You can carry as much as you want and you don't have to be lugging around suitcases full of gold or currency. You can send it anywhere around the world as long as you've got a computer connection. Then you have access to it and you can transact in it. So as a store of value, it's highly attractive to everybody, including criminals. But hopefully that's not too big a use case in your client base.
No,
I wouldn't have thought so.
Definitely not. But it's also just, again, back to what you do here is being fully informed, educated, and doing it the right way. And not doing it the wrong way. Yeah. And then that should mitigate any potential risks that might come about.
Yeah, it's the same with how you conduct anything in business.
Absolutely. It's the same as everything. Yeah. It's
if
not rocket science in that respect, is it?
No,
it's the same principles applied to this as well as other investments. Yep.
The rules are reasonable. I mean, as a rule of thumb, I just say to people, just treat it as if it's like an equities share or something.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the same framework that you're going to be adhering to. And the rules are not unreasonable. It's people will try and optimize their tax. That's fine, but you don't want to try and evade it.
No. But key thing is fully informed education, and again, what you do is really important because Yeah, it's a complicated area, and you need to be fully informed to make proper decisions.
It is, and it's fast changing. And I think that, I think that fully informed, I think is probably too lofty a benchmark, though. I think,
fair enough.
The reason I say that is because I'm not fully informed. But it's, I think that you need to be informed enough that it's aligned with your risk appetite.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. Yep.
And if you're investing 5% of your portfolio into Bitcoin and a couple other big currencies, then your level of informed is probably going to be much lower. And if you're doing it through a trusted, let's say you've got a crypto broker who you can trust, who's an expert and is keeping you up to date with things, then and is a phone call away when you need it, then your level of personal knowledge is much lower than if you are trading meme coins on a intraday basis and gearing them up, 50x gearing on it. You need to be a lot more informed.
So is there going to be an Andrew coin coming out soon? Or
No. There are so many coins now, and it's. I think that is probably another thing that's holding crypto back a bit is just this deluge. It's so easy to create coins that everybody is creating coins for everything, and people, that loses sight of the value that you're creating. I think that my view on coins is it should be like businesses. It should be you need to be creating some form of value, and that's what people should be investing in, not just speculating that this community is going to get bigger and bigger, and so it's going to go up until one day it crashes and the bubble bursts. I mean, that's not really the investing that aligns to my risk appetite. But
that's fair enough.
Andrew, when we had you come in and do a presentation for the team, you talked about some businesses, global businesses that accept cryptocurrency as a form of payment. And I think that's probably something that not a lot of average people are thinking about, unless, mums and dads certainly aren't thinking to themselves, I'll just pull out my crypto wallet and tap when I'm buying my groceries. But that is becoming something that is a bit more reasonable for regular people. Those businesses, talk us through some of them, and we're going to, there's obviously some big names, and you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars when you're trying to buy something from them, but there's smaller businesses as well, aren't they, that accept crypto?
Absolutely. You've even got crypto-backed Visa cards now.
Yeah, okay.
So technically anything, that takes Visa, you could,
I see.
You could actually, be technically using.
So you could go and
crypto.
Use it at the supermarket.
And but a different paradigm to think this through is like we're in Australia, we're in a really safe jurisdiction. We've got we're not worried that the government's going to take all of our money or the banks are going to go bankrupt overnight, and we're going to lose everything or it's just going to disappear. But that's not the case in a lot of countries. Yeah. And for a lot of countries, having a digital currency that is separate from the central bank and separate from the control of a government, their government, is actually really important and really powerful for their own independence and security, financial security. And even from there's a lot of countries that don't have reliable financial systems for payments as well. Yeah. And so again, where you can have a payment process that just needs, to rely on an internet connection, then again, these things suddenly start holding an appeal, which for us in Australia, we might not really value that much because our systems are robust and trustworthy and good and reliable. But when you don't have that, it becomes incredibly powerful. Yeah. So I think that it is a day-to-day, currency for in certain jurisdictions, certain countries. But there's been a lot of prestige brands have been allowing you to buy, Ferraris or whatever, using cryptocurrency for many years. Yeah. And it probably started as a PR plug, to be honest. Yeah. But it's now absolutely accepted as a form of currency. There's businesses that are banks, which are crypto-based banks. And I think from the second half of this year ongoing, you're going to see a massive transformation let out of the US financial system as their regulatory environment shifts and becomes much more pro blockchain and pro crypto.
Yep.
I am sure that every Main Street financial services business bank in the US is dusting off their plans for how they're going to make money out of that, and bring out new crypto-backed services to their clients, whether it's custodying their Bitcoin for them, crypto-backed lending, or transactions based on blockchain. You will see a wave of this. I think it's going to explode.
Yeah. It's incredible when you think about that sort of stuff because, when we started this conversation, we're talking about, my mate at the pub said that I should just buy these, meme coins or whatever. And now we're talking about, wholesale change to the way people transact with businesses, with each other, that sort of thing. It's a big thing. And I think for us, making sure that our clients and our network is aware of all of this because not everyone wants to get involved in it from a day-to-day perspective, but some people may want to dabble a bit or they, their kids even. Like you find that sometimes it's mum and dad are saying, my kids want to do something with it and they need to know more. Other than you, which we will share all of your details as part of the info for the podcast and on our socials, which we've already done. But other than you, what are some really easy resources that you can recommend to people listening where they should go to get quality info about this?
So I think if I look at the sources that I have, a lot of mine is actually through X or Twitter, X. If I want to know what's going on, it's funny because I stopped using Twitter years and years and years ago, and then as I got more into crypto, I started using that as my crypto information source. Because I find that that's where the crypto community live. There, they do not live in mass media. If you read the mass media, the news on your app on your iPhone, the news app, you're not going to see anything that to do with that. But on X, you've got a finger on the pulse of everything that's happening. So that's where I go. I go to X, but I follow. And I'd start with, who are the officials in that space. So I'd be looking at a lot is being led out of the US. So I'd be following, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary in the US, David Sachs leading the crypto working group. So people like that. So who are the key players in the administration who are actually making policy? And then you sort of just see who's commenting, see what else, your feed the algorithm starts kicking in, and then you start working out who do you like the sound of. There's one guy that I use, Anthony Pompliano. He's a brash New York sort of guy, but he's so he's not everyone's cup of tea, but I find him really insightful because he does a lot of his own proprietary research. And so he does the hard work. He doesn't just take what else is everyone else that's talking on NX and regurgitate it. He'll go and do his own research, and so I follow him and a few others like him. In Australia, you've got DECA that I mentioned about, DECA. So that's a good source of trusted information as well. I think that there aren't too many other independent voices in this industry yet.
You're a trailblazer.
Well, let's hope
That's why he's here.
It's hopefully the leading edge, not the bleeding edge. But,
I think, as I said, we will share all of the details for Andrew as part of our socials and via this podcast as well, because for us, it's really important that our community gets access to information about these things, because the last thing we want is I heard it from my mate down the pub, because Andrew might very well go to the pub with you. We'll talk about a little bit about Andrew outside of his crypto stuff right away, but it's really important, this information, and making sure that, like Shane said, being fully informed. There's a difference between having trusted people in your network who you can bounce things off like this, and kind of knowing as much as what you know. Like we don't even know as much as you know, but we have you come in and talk to us about and talk to the team. So we will share all of your details, but before we wrap up podcast, because we've talked a lot about crypto, let's talk about Andrew. Because as I said when we first started, you are an old friend, not old in age, but old in how long we've known.
Yes.
We met through your beautiful wife, Kate, who I'm hoping she will not mind me mentioning her, because Kate and I worked together, and we were just saying Kate would have started working with me 26, 27 years ago. And you guys got married the week after Shane and I got married. I think that when we worked together at the Guild bought Kate towels. I wonder if you've still got those beautiful towels that were bought as a wedding gift for you. But you've done a lot of things. Kate has also done a lot of things between those times. You've been overseas working. You've had 3 beautiful children. You've been in so many businesses. Tell us a little bit about Andrew, the person, not Andrew from Synergist.
Oh, wow.
I know.
It's a big
we've
open
only
question.
We've only got about 30 seconds, so just run it through.
This is one of those conversations better had at the pub.
Correct.
Look, you've done it. You've given a good overview, and so I guess I've been really fortunate. I've been together with Kate now for a long time, 26 years married. So a lot longer than 30 years all up. So it does kind of age you a bit, doesn't it? But no, we did. We've around the time that she met you, I think we went overseas and worked in London for a few years. That was a fantastic experience at the .com crash days back in the 99, early 2000s. And so I was fortunate enough to get a job building an internet share trading platform for a big Scandinavian bank but we were based in London. And that was amazing experience. And then we took about 10 months off and travelled, and then came home to breed, as I like to say. And we did want to stay in London, but we just didn't want to have a family away from our families. So Melbourne.
You're
is
both
home.
very close to your families.
And so Melbourne is home. So so we've done that. We're really passionate about.
Collingwood.
Collingwood.
Also one of the reasons why Andrew's here today. He's a good bloke that way.
Well, I'm passionate about Collingwood. Kate would be horrified.
We're going to throw her in that bucket right now.
But no, look, we're very involved with our kids' lives and coach basketball for them, and we love being part of the school communities there with them as well. It's
I think Melbourne is good for that. It's a good place to bring up kids, right?
It is.
I've just got a quick question. So when we caught up a little while ago, you were renovating the pool and that's all finished. How did it all turn out?
Oh, look, it looks great.
Was it worth it?
I wouldn't recommend it.
Right.
Look, it was challenging. It was a lot of hard manual work, grinding it all back and everything. And it was also needed to be done in summer. So think about being in a concrete shell in a 35-degree day for hours on end.
When everyone just wants to be swimming.
Oh, yeah, it was full on. But look, it's certainly rewarding, and we've used the pool more than we ever have since I renovated it. So we've had the payoff. So it's been worth it.
Yeah. And cycling. Before we finish up today, you need to tell us, because you are a mammal.
Yes,
you are. I've seen photos, so you are.
Might not the MA part in the front. Might not profess to that.
I think it probably is now. We've said that we're
very
old,
safely,
so that's
very
okay.
Safely in that MA.
Where's your favourite place to ride in Melbourne?
Look, probably not in Melbourne, but Bright it would be the favourite place. I love the sort of the mountains, and we love Bright, and so my favourite ride is Mount Buffalo. Yeah, it's one-way traffic, so there's no through road, there's a lot less cars on there. Mm-hmm. You can hear them coming a mile away as well. And it's just beautiful scenery, nice steady gradient, and
the one
fun on the descent.
Up the mountain as I'm in the car going, why would people put themselves through that on the weekend?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
So what's the maximum gradient on Mount Buffalo?
Oh, it's not too much. It's only about maybe the maximum is like 7 7.5 or something,
okay.
8 maybe tops,
Yeah.
and for a short period. But it's an average of about 6. It's
Right.
pretty steady gradient.
Yeah.
And how long for? Because
23 Ks.
wow. Yeah. Okay.
So it's a nice climb. It's challenging, but it's not too hard.
Yeah.
Certainly not the hardest climb.
And how often do you do that, Andrew?
Well, look, I don't cycle anywhere near as much as I used to.
Yeah.
I used to be right into it. But I think I was looking on my Strava. I've done it 22 times, Mount
Wow.
Buffalo. So it's still one that when we go up to Bright, probably half a dozen times a year. And I do try and take my bike up if the weather's good and ride Buffalo each time as much as I can.
Yep.
So yeah, I try and do it a couple of times a year, 2, 3, 4 times a year if I can.
Yeah. It's a pretty social sort of thing. I'm not talking about this particular ride because I don't know if you do that one with friends, but being a cyclist, you see, anyone who is from Melbourne would know that there are groups of men ride around on their bikes on like Sunday mornings and things like that. You can hear them chatting with each other though as a driver driving past or walking and stuff. And I think as much as we have a bit of a laugh at you,
get out of the way.
Get out of the way, driving, two abreast on the local road. But I think it's a really social thing. Is that the reason why you do it? Because it's social, or do you do it so that you can, have the peace and quiet and the wind in your hair?
Look, it's both, but it's probably biased more towards the social side. It is a real subculture, and there's a sense of community to it as a result. And as you get older, it's really hard for guys to sort of maintain friendships and prioritize them over all the other competing things that you've got in your life.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys don't.
Yeah.
And so cycling seems to be a pretty approachable way to be able to do that. And so even a good example is last Sunday I was doing a workout instead with Kate. I chose to do that over cycling, but I then drove down and met up with the guys and had a coffee with them because I knew where they were going to be and still got the social interaction. So it probably says everything.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think it's really great. We talk a lot about in our team as well about, mental health and keeping space for yourself and making sure that you're doing things that, for you as well as running a business. And I think that's really important because we've talked a lot about today your expertise with crypto. We haven't talked a lot about the fact that this is actually a fledgling business for you. Like you've gone from being someone who has been earning, wage and salary money and whatever, and now you've got this business and it is a big step, isn't it? A big leap to go, I'm all of a sudden running a business. And we haven't talked about that today. So maybe that's another podcast episode with you where we don't talk about crypto and we talk about Synergist as a business and how, you want to move forward and how you want to achieve with that because it is pretty fledgling at the moment. And as you said, so much changing. So, you're doing things in Synergist and then a week later you're almost having to, change to meet demand,
adapt,
and things like that and everything, which is a big deal.
Look, it's not what I was expecting to be doing. It's doing a startup at my age. And I think listening to this conversation, it'll be triggering Kate because she certainly wasn't expecting the bank account to look like it does. But it's, it was, and it is probably a whole nother topic to get into it. But, ultimately what was driving for me is, I wanted to create something more sustainable. I didn't want to just be selling my time for money. And I love having an impact. And I left corporate because I felt like I was getting too senior and too removed from the impact. People who've been in corporate probably understand what I mean. It becomes more about just the, dare I say it, the politics or the power dynamics. And I love leading people and all that. And the helping people with personal development was really satisfying. But I started feeling too removed from the actual impact on the customers. And I went, no, it didn't feel real enough anymore. And so the consulting has been amazing, helping real businesses on the ground roll your sleeves up and get going and do things and add value and seeing that drive real impact for real people, real change. And do a lot of executive coaching, which is very much the same reward. But this is about, evolving that into creating something of value. And even a lot of my clients now that I've got, I still do consulting, it's more on an equity arrangement. Again, so I can sort of have a bit more skin in the game there. But yeah, it's certainly rewarding. But you have to change your whole approach in a number of not whole approach, but you certainly have to change a lot of things.
Yeah. It's certainly something that we need to talk about in another episode, because I'm really keen to talk to you about a few things, namely the fact that you're saying that getting your hands dirty again. I've just been reading a book by Kim Scott called Radical Candor, and she talks about being a leader, but actually walking back into and sitting at a desk and getting your hands dirty in the work that gets done, because there's such a disconnect between that and leadership. And if you don't know what your team is doing, then it's really hard to lead them forward with that. So
I think that's a really important point. And for me, it was even more than that, though. It was about my own personal satisfaction and feeling of a sense of value, the value that I'm creating. I just wanted to make it more real. But it is, the amazing thing that I've been reflecting on a lot lately is actually how this ties into AI. Because crypto and AI are the two biggest waves of change that we're dealing with over the next 5 years. And I've been leveraging AI and trying to explore how its potential, how much can it actually do, as part of my startup, and the things that I've been doing with it is mind-boggling. Like I built a platform in 3 weeks, which would have taken me 12 months and cost $1 million. Even 12 months ago it would have, and I've built it myself with that no coding in 3 weeks, and it's deployed.
It is actually phenomenal, that piece. And now we've got a third podcast that we can do together, because you and I could just talk leg off a chair about AI and how great it would be. Having said all of that, we'll finish up today's episode talking about crypto. We will definitely get you to come back again, my marketing team, if you can be on that, so that you can get Andrew to come back in. Thank you so much for sharing everything with us, not only on this podcast, but for coming in and talking to our team, for coming in and talking to our clients. We will make sure that we share everything that we can about what you're doing, because for us, it's absolutely vital that our community knows what they're getting themselves into if they're getting into all of this. Thank you for coming in today, Andrew. I've really appreciated your time. All of the stuff to do with you will be shared by our team as part of this podcast. So
thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks everyone for tuning into Q&A with S&A. We'll see you next time.